about last week where he has played a little bit better. What a pass by Rondo.
That might be the dagger.
Why not? Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league?
The Lakers repeat back-to-back titles. The LA Lakers, the 2010 NBA champions.
And finally, a challenging list with some question as to who will be, as the great Biggie Smalls would say, nombre uno. That wasn't even all though. I actually struggled with who to put on this list, having to leave some people out and just placing them overall. So I believe this belongs at the beginning of the video. Bosh and Tim Duncan are on the power forwards list. I'm explaining this here instead of taking up their time because they were in this really weird situation where technically they played a lot of center in the decade, but we generally ranked them as all-time power forwards and basketball became positionless through this era. Their placement on either list is going to be controversial, so I'm going to go with what we know them as. And speaking of things you might think you know, I bet you didn't know there was a much more secure and convenient way for you to be surfing the internet. This is you. This is the information you're sending over the internet. And this is how incredibly easy it is for that information to be stolen by virtually any hacker. The internet has become such a big part of our lives that we don't often realize how exposed we are, and that's where ExpressVPN watches your back. A VPN, or virtual private network, creates a secure path between your device and the internet to ensure that any information you send remains private. ExpressVPN encrypts your connection so that it's secure from hackers, hides your data and location from literally anyone trying to obtain it, and because of that, you're free to do whatever you need regardless of the region you're in. For instance, a certain NBA game may be blocked due to blackout restrictions in my area. With ExpressVPN hiding my location or me simply choosing a server in a different area, I'm now free to watch that game regardless of where I am. I've also had countless people message me to say that they weren't able to view certain videos on my channel, and ExpressVPN would easily solve that, or any YouTube video blocked in a certain country. So if you feel that your handle on your information is not tight enough, find out how you can get 3 months free of ExpressVPN by clicking the link in the comment section and description, or type in expressvpn.com/dom2k. Paul Millsap has been like the Tim Duncan of Paul Millsaps. He's not generally considered to be an exciting player, but he has been consistent and good. In the 2010s, he's been a good scoring stretch 4, nabbed all 4 of his All-Star appearances, and made an All-Defensive second team in 2016. Today he resides in Denver, where he's still providing good offense for a team that has contending hopes. He beat out Kevin Garnett for the 10th spot simply because Garnett hit a wall after 2013 and almost immediately fizzled out before retiring in 2016. With Millsap's steady play and accomplishments, it'd be kind of disrespectful to have KG over him this decade simply because of name recognition. Anyways, I promise the next 9 spots are a lot more exciting than Paul Millsap. Ah yes, the curious case of Kevin Love, the man who all but started, or maybe he just continued, the whole great stats on a bad team argument. Well, despite popular belief, Kevin Love was literally a top player in the league before taking a massive role reduction in Cleveland. He averaged 22 and 13 for the first 5 seasons of the decade in Minnesota, and that's also where he picked up his 2 lone All-NBA teams. His main problems there were health and a decent roster, so once he actually joined a good team, people questioned if he was ever more than just empty stats. However, I've always imagined that if you could put up numbers on a team where the defense really only had to focus on you, then you probably had some kind of incredible talent. During his 4 seasons with LeBron, he was still able to make 2 All-Star teams and average 17 and 10 overall. But because the spot-up shooting Kevin Love was such a massive scale back from the guy we saw with the Wolves, his quote-unquote demise is a bit overplayed. Nevertheless, the smaller role did hurt his ranking here, where he probably could have done much better than 9th. Still, he's probably happy with the championship. LaMarcus Aldridge is the Paul Millsap of LaMarcus Aldridges. Very good and consistent, yet underrated. As a matter of fact, scratch that. Throughout the 2010s, Aldridge has actually been great. He's consistently one of the best low post / mid-range scoring big men, and has the All-Stars and even All-NBA appearances to show for it, with 7 and 5 respectively. That's why I say underrated. Who has ever acknowledged that LaMarcus Aldridge has been an All-NBA player for half the seasons in this decade? That probably has a lot to do with his San Antonio experiment under-delivering, to be honest. When he joined a Spurs team that was only 1 year removed from a title and still had Ginobili, Duncan, Leonard, Parker, a second round out is not what I or anybody else imagined. People forget that they were actually right on the 73-9 Warriors' heels practically the entire season. But yes, being that San Antonio is never that popular in the media anyways, and that they've gone from contenders to fringe playoff teams in his time there, it doesn't help his recognition. Still, individually, he's done a lot this decade and is definitely the most underrated player relative to his production in my opinion. And no, his mid-range game is not what I'm talking about, Slam. Jesus Christ. Okay, Blake made it here over Aldridge by the skin of his teeth, yet it's hard to ignore that he placed third in MVP voting in 2014, and it's a stark reminder how good he's been for the time that he's actually seen the floor. Yes, injuries have certainly put the brakes on what was supposed to be a generational talent, but even with that, he still managed 5 All-Stars, 5 All-NBA teams, the most impressive of which was last year after it seemed he was kinda fading away. 2019 was probably the best year of his career surprisingly. Not as flashy as the others, but his game had definitely evolved since the Clippers days as the three-point shot became the staple of his game. Now here we are at the beginning of the 2020 season and already, he's played only one of the Pistons' first 12 games. And that's exactly why I kept him out of the playoffs in my season predictions on the second channel. Where there is good Blake Griffin performances, the injuries are never far behind. He's got the accomplishments and mega talent throughout the 2010s, but he's also got a 4-season stretch where injuries completely held both him and his team back. And that's difficult to ignore. That's very difficult to ignore when you're trying to move him up a list, and that's why he's behind my next pick. Wow. Yeah, I had a really hard time ranking Draymond Green over players that I know he's not more talented than. However, his impact on and availability to winning teams could not be denied. See, right now, Green is playing on a lottery team, and you no longer hear about him because, as many of us were saying before, his game has never been about individual talent. I would have never taken him over a lot of the other guys to be the man on a team. That includes Kevin Love, Aldridge, and Blake Griffin. However, when Golden State was good, they found it very difficult to replace the value that he brought. The leadership, the energy, the defense, the willingness to accept his role. There was always a decently sized void when he wasn't there. See Game 5 of the 2016 NBA Finals. So would I say Green is a better player than almost anybody I've listed so far? No. Would I rank his 5 all-defensive teams, 2 all-NBA teams, 3 all-stars, contributions to 3 titles, and Defensive Player of the Year over them for a decade? Absolutely. NBA talk is this weird paradox because we'll put down a player like Kevin Love for not being the same superstar once he's on a good team, but then not credit a player like Draymond where it's due when they're more useful on a good team than a bad one. So yes, don't expect to hear much from him until he's on a team that's actually competing for something again, as in next year when the Warriors have a lottery pick and everybody's healthy. But at the same time, individual talent aside, he earned the right to be here. So as much as I was ready to have Blake Griffin be in the 6th spot over him, how would I ignore that any momentum that he's had throughout the decade has always been sabotaged by injury? His teams have suffered from it. You don't get credit for what you didn't do, so even if Griffin had the potential to be the 2nd or 1st best player on a Clippers title team, it simply never came to fruition. Meanwhile, Green being important to literally all of the Warriors titles did. Bosh's career ended in one of the more brutal ways possible. One minute Miami's got a team that looks like it could make a run through the East even without LeBron, and the next, his career is quite literally over. Although I don't think he's technically came out and said I'm retiring, at 34 years old with around 4 seasons away from basketball now, it's pretty safe to say it's over. Even with that, he's a top 5 power forward of the decade to me. While he did take a role cut to play in Miami, it didn't seem to affect the public perception of him the way it did for Love. That's probably because Bosh was still crucial to Miami's defense, and he never truly struggled as he was an all-star every year of the 2010s that he played. His numbers also did not drop as drastically as Love's did. Also helping his ranking here is the fact that he helped Miami to 2 titles. That makes him and Draymond the only 2 players on this list so far with multiple rings. With a crucial role in 2 titles coupled with 7 all-star appearances, he really could have wound up higher on this list with 3 more seasons under his belt. Perhaps the expanded role after LeBron's departure would have led to a couple of all-NBA teams, but we never even saw him play a full season after LeBron, so I still think he's behind a few guys. At first glance, you remember Dirk basically not being able to run or jump anymore after 2017, and you wonder why he's so high on this list. However, do not let the last 3 seasons fool you. As odd as it sounds, his loyalty to Dallas, especially after bringing them a title, pretty much wasted what were still good years of his career up until around 2016. I mean, they let Tyson Chandler go right after they won in 2011, and the roster was kind of downhill from there, save for a last-ditch effort in 2015. Still, he picked up 3 All-NBA teams this decade, ranked in MVP voting 4 times, earned 5 All-Star teams because last season's does not count, and won either the first or second most important title of the entire decade. He was the Finals MVP of that series. That's where a ton of his points come from. You stack his accomplishments and play on top of that, and he's 4th for me. History tries to make Dallas a better team than they were every single year, when the reality is that they were on nobody's radar to actually win it all in 2011, especially after Caron Butler tore his ACL. They might have been considered fringe contenders if you were just naming contending teams for that year, but they weren't near the top. Him being Finals MVP of a series with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh in it will always be one of the more impressive feats the game has seen. He didn't have a co-star for that series, and in an era based around star power, that will always stick out. Dirk damn near had to be rolled into retirement on a wheelchair, but the first 6 years are enough to carry him here. Tim Duncan put me through more than he should have trying to figure out if he should be on the center or power forward list. But in this era, bro, who cares? He was gonna be super high either way. He really played a lot of both throughout his career, so let's just go with the traditional position. Duncan had just about the most perfect career any player could have, and that counts for the 2010s as well. Even as his physical ability was diminishing and you could see all the gray hairs, the fundamentals never disappeared, and he didn't limp away from the game when he knew it was time to go. Anyways, despite being drafted in the late 90s, he managed 4 more All-Star selections in this decade, along with 6 All-League teams that includes 3 defensive squads and 3 All-NBA. His overall averages for the years remained at a respectable 15 and 9 with 2 blocks per game, and he was 36 and 37 years old respectively as he helped lead the Spurs to 2 more title runs. Think about that for a moment. In Game 6 against the Heat, when the Spurs nearly put them away and Duncan was having the game of his life, he was 36 years old. Despite that heartbreaking loss, he and the Spurs had enough in the tank to run it back and then win it. And then he made an all-star team after that Charles Barkley did not agree with. Still, fucking legendary run. Especially when you consider the type of player he'd been and how important he'd been to his team since the day he was drafted. I don't know how any of it was physically possible. He was technically getting older when this decade started and still went on to add more accomplishments. Tim Duncan ranks 3rd here, and off the top of my head, he's probably the oldest player to be in a top 5 of any of these lists so far. Controversial. Throughout the 2010s, Anthony Davis has been the most talented power forward in the league, and I don't think there's any questions about that. Here we are in 2020, and he's just now playing the first meaningful basketball of his career. Is that his fault? Probably not, but 10 games into this season and he's already playing through injuries that might eventually see him sitting some games. I mean, that wouldn't be any different than what's gone on most of this decade. He routinely plays around 65 games a season, and that's been his one downfall. Still, he's managed the 6 All-Star teams, 3 All-NBA teams, and 3 defensive teams. Like I said, 4 power forward, talking about both sides of the ball. If you're counting every year, nobody has been more talented. Still, with his lack of any kind of winning and his rugged injury history, that's where I can split hairs and place him 2nd. It's just too much to overlook when I'm reviewing what he's up against. Giannis came up very quickly, and I believe he took this first spot very quickly. Unlike other lists, yes, there is a debate to be had. You can debate his 3 All-Star appearances versus AD's 6, but then check out how Giannis has almost the same number of all-league teams, despite only having been at an elite level since about 2017. He then proceeds to put up Monstar level numbers while at the age of 24, helping lead the Bucks to 60 wins, the Eastern Conference Finals, and grabbing an MVP. Okay, look, I'm not going to compare his team situation to AD's because clearly the Bucks were better despite not having household names aside from Giannis, but I do want to point out that Giannis has actually been present to make these type of seasons possible. He's played more than 70 games each year of his career. So between his MVP, competitive play, availability, and all league teams that closely resemble AD's, it's very hard for me to say he's 2nd. Is AD more talented as of right now? Yeah, probably. He can shoot better, he's a defensive juggernaut, he's got more in his bag. But are his numbers enough to overshadow what Giannis has done in such a short time? I don't think they are, but that's for y'all to discuss in the comment section. Or you can come discuss it on Twitch tomorrow or Sunday morning, not sure exactly when I'll be live, but I do stream on Twitch. There's no way people are still popping up in my chat saying they didn't know now, so come through and say so if you'd like to be roasted. Also, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, comment, and sub, and be sure to hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications when another episode of NBA 2010s drops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.